2, 1. Boom, what's up everyone? Welcome to Simulation. We are going to be talking about Elon Musk on Joe Rogan Experience. It was a super enriching conversation that they had. It is definitely one of my favorite conversations that I've heard between two people. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that this marks a really crucial pillar and point in history where we can see two intellectuals have discourse that's multidisciplinary, nuance-driven, and equanimous, calm and fun, and talking about the future of humanity, inspiring people. So huge thumbs up to that conversation, and we're gonna have a good breakdown right now of kind of what was discussed and those highlights, and see how we can potentially aim to make things even more better. So, all right, the first thing that I want to showcase is this post that I posted immediately after the conversation, because I think that if we are really smart and listening to what was being discussed, we would see that Elon referenced the importance of AI and referenced the importance Joe as well. Joe saw it and kept talking to him about it. And Elon made it very clear that he's been trying to have this conversation with so many people on the planet that are leaders across government, entrepreneurs, different places in the world, and people are just not listening to him. And this is the problem right here. And we'll show it to you right now. In the post that I made, I said that, can you believe that Elon looks at AI and warns about AI ethics, and then all of the media outlets talk about his smoking weed on the show? Smoking marijuana has so little to do with the important part of the conversation. The important part of the conversation is way heavily weighted in artificial intelligence and our future with AI, future with the ethics around that, and so little in marijuana and weed, but yet all of the news outlets were about that. So it shows you how stupid our mainstream media is. It shows you how clickbaity our mainstream media is and our culture is in that sense. It shows you how distracted our culture is away from what is actually important. So let's focus on what's important, which is artificial intelligence, the ethics around that, the morals around that, geopolitics around AI, and how it's going to be built. So, all right, moving on. We're going to go break down this episode. So kind of one of the first main things that I thought was important that I wish Joe pushed Elon back a little bit on was the Boring Company. So Elon's making it very clear that this idea of digging tunnels under Los Angeles and under all these heavily trafficked areas and going past this two-dimensional surface, you see three-dimensional buildings next to two-dimensional roadways, right? It doesn't make any sense. So if you have all those people up and you have all those people that could only go in one dimension on 2D, you're inevitably gonna have traffic. So Elon's building 3D, he's going underground with the tunnels. But there are many companies like Kitty Hawk that are working on vertical takeoff and landing cars. So flying cars actually have the same third dimensional potential. They can go up in the air and fly and land. So it's really difficult to know how long it's gonna take for cars to be able to fly over long distances like we see with Kitty Hawk and other companies that are working on this, versus if it's actually worth the resources and infrastructure investment that we're putting in to building tunnels underground. And Elon's right in many ways that this maglev, in a vacuum tunnel underground is extremely fast. It's not modular. You can't turn the tunnel and pivot in a direction. I don't know if you maybe put some sort of a mechanism on the sides that could pivot it in a direction, then you'd have to dig out that entire direction underground so that it could go like that. But you get the idea is that vertical takeoff and landing can go anywhere, but this sort of limitation and amount of infrastructure that we're going to build out with the Boring might not actually be what we'll use in a decade if we can really get good at vertical takeoff and landing. So it's just food for thought. I wish there was some pushback. I would have loved to hear that. I still don't know how I feel about Musk selling flamethrowers. That's kind of a crazy thought process. It's a little bit fun, but dangerous. So not really quite sure how to feel about that. And it's kind of weird that he said don't buy the flamethrower, but he still made it. So it's just a very strange thing to unpack. Okay, so this is another thing that I would have really liked to hear more about. So this idea about time management and about how Musk is at Tesla and he's at SpaceX and then he's at doing a lot of other work with OpenAI and his other projects. And if it's even possible to manage someone's family, 5 kids, and also the $2 billion companies he has and all these other works that he's working on, and he's an investor in many companies. So how he's managing to do that, I wish we could unpack that more. And also I would like to unpack not only his balance with his work and life, but also I'd like to unpack how it feels to be a human that is at that level, because there are a lot of people that are trying to ask you for things. And I just wonder how it feels to be a human that constantly has to watch your back, because people can be potentially trying to, in some way, take advantage of you and what's going on. And you know, it's a difficult process to figure out who is trustworthy and who you need to push away from a bit. That's a tough process, and it would have been nice to unpack that a bit. Joe Rogan even gets some of that. Joe Rogan doesn't being like asked for things either. So I wonder how within the power distribution of the hierarchy, when people get higher up, I want to know how they engage with people in that sense and how they build trust. So I think that would have been a really interesting aspect to push back on a bit. I thought this was quite interesting. There was a lot of explain like I'm 5 going on. Elon Musk did a pretty good job at keeping things non-technical, and even when he did make them technical, he tried to make them as relatable as possible. And so I think that his aspect of science communication was just spot on and really good. And then also just the eccentricity in general, I think is something else that's really interesting, because if you think about how eccentric Musk is, he doesn't really worry about the way that he speaks or the way that his arms move or the way that his eyes move. And you can see this multiple times in the video. His eyes kind of go back and forth, looking downward, or that he'll finish a sentence and look at Joe, and then he'll go, and he'll do that again. It's like he'll nod his head and move forward towards Joe. So the idea is that these are kind of more eccentric idiosyncrasies in behavior, and yet he is continuously totally himself and doesn't mind that. And I think that's really important to showcase to kids and understand that, hey, no matter where you are in social and behavior, know that it's just fine to be you. And then at some point we will figure out how to, if someone is a little bit way too eccentric and very difficult for social situations, there will be some sort of an integration, but it's totally cool to walk on your own path and all this other kind of stuff. So without going into that in too much detail, I want to move on to, this is really important, because we were talking about AI at the beginning. We were talking about the percentage of intelligence. This is really important. That is not human is increasing and soon will be smaller than the percentage of intelligence that's not human is increasing, and soon it will surpass the percentage of intelligence that is human. So right now, arguably, you could say that there is more intelligence on Earth that is not human because of animal intelligence. There's more animal intelligence than there is human intelligence. Secondly, there is more artificial intelligence that is going to be happening in the future than there will be human intelligence. So that percentage is raising, and that's something that is, again, just a concern to look at and think about. So Musk referenced robots moving so fast that you can't see them without a strobe light. So, just even little tiny nanobots that you can't see flying around. They're just moving super fast and super quick, and we're inevitably going to get there. And it's too bad that we're not having enough of the conversation about the ethics and about what we're going to do geopolitically about it. And we need to be focused on doing that more. They use this term limbic resonance, and I thought that, I talked to some neuroscientists, and they thought that was kind of, it was interesting, but it's difficult to unpack what limbic resonance means. But I thought that in the context it meant really kind of like this primordial sort of resonance, that when you use something like Instagram, that you see photos, and photos are more resonant to you and because of your visual system of perceiving. And that is a very visual, is very, very primordial and limbic versus something like something prefrontal, like organization of structuring a company or something like that. It's more difficult for people to structure a company than it is for them to scroll through Instagram. Okay, so again, just this essence about artificial intelligence and how that he was working on having people help regulate it, but that it wasn't working out. It would have been nice if maybe Joe pushed a bit and said, who did you talk to? What did you talk to them about? What were their responses like? Tell us about these prominent figures around the world that were not taking you seriously. Let's start calling people out for not taking it seriously and not taking action about it. So, Musk's work in Neuralink is also very interesting. We talked about brain-computer interfaces a bit this weekend at the Brain Mind conference at Stanford. And brain-computer interfaces are something that is just insanely interesting for the future, because it's going to take us away from using 10 fingers on a keyboard or 2 thumbs on a smartphone, and it's going to move us towards just going through thought. So right now, we're using voice and video, which is pretty high bandwidth, but it would be even more high bandwidth if I could just think these thoughts and they could just go out to the internet. And so that essence, if I could just think to message just you, or if I could think to just make an event in my calendar or send an email or whatever it may be. So brain-computer interfaces, being able to tap in to gain any information through Wikipedia, through any of these sources that you want. It's crazy how it's going to change the bandwidth. It's also going to decrease miscommunication. So for example, when I say the word 7 and you hear the word 7, you go, oh, that means 7. But if I say the word love, you might think, what is he talking about? Is he talking about loving his mom, his dad, his girlfriend, his brother, sister? Or is he talking about loving a friend? What does love mean to him? Does that mean a hug? Does that mean a kiss? Does that mean sex? Does that mean, what does love actually mean? Does love mean you give him money, you don't give him money? There's all these different types of things about love. Would you die for them? Would you not? So again, it's like we're going to have a greater bandwidth in terms of communication, because that my thought about love, you will understand what I meant without needing to use these words to try and unpack what it was. That can be very interesting. Okay, something else that was discussed is about the biological self dying. So if the biological self dies and you can boot yourself up on another device like a robotic exoskeleton, that is a huge deal. And if you can figure out how to translate consciousness into a substrate that can then be uploaded onto other things like an exoskeleton and live on that and fly through the sky and go and live for hundreds of years, thousands of years at a time, that is a very promising idea of the future, that you can transcend your biological body. And how would consciousness work? We don't know yet, but it's a very interesting thing. I would have loved to have more conversation about that as well, and where that's going, how the technicalities of that actually work. So another aspect to social media is just that they talked about how people are posting a lot about how they have a much better life than they actually do, and that sort of re-baselining of expectations is actually really important for us to analyze and understand, and just see that, oh God, we're like not talking about any of our sadness or our frustration or how we get through stuff and that kind of things. We're rarely ever talking about that. We're totally just posting our absolute best selves and having a competition of comparing ourselves. And that essence of comparing ourselves, it's the thief of joy. And we really got to understand that's the thief of joy, is comparing ourselves in all these different ways. But at the same time, comparing ourselves can be very motivating, because it can be like, hey, if Elon can start a billion-dollar company that changes the world, so can I. So I can use it as a tool of inspiration as well. So, there was conversation about the simulation argument being very strong. As you guys know, our show is called Simulation. And so, for example, when we have conversation with our guests and we ask them, do you believe we are in a computer simulation? A lot of the times our guests will say, yeah, that they think this is not base reality. And that is becoming more and more of a popular school of thought, because we do understand that, first of all, that this consciousness is not necessarily strapped to just this flesh vehicle, that this spirit exists in another place that is not here in this physical world. And also, furthermore, is that we are unsure if once we get in 50 or 100 years to a point of indistinguishable virtual realities and immerse ourselves in them, that you just go and live in a virtual world for 80 years. Well, how is this not that already? So that's why the simulation argument is very strong, and I'm really happy that they unpacked that quite a bit. It would have been nice to go even deeper into understanding what kind of a world we'll live in a couple decades, when people prefer to live in virtual realities because the real world is just boring in comparison. Or can we make the real world so awesome that being in virtual worlds is also awesome, but the real world is still also great as well? So, there was this period of time on the show where they talked about Tesla being the most enjoyable gift. And I think that that's a really good way to understand Musk's design and engineering background, and how much he cares about really building things of value into the world. And if he says that, I want to build the best gift for someone, and that is a Tesla, that is why when you sit in a Tesla, that it feels like an amazing experience. This electrical car is just so amazingly controlled. It's amazingly aesthetically pleasing, and it is also it's equipped with the best technology, and it's also playful. That whole Rainbow Road thing, the whole Easter eggs, like that Siberian orchestra that plays, that you just have to unlock these things. No other automotive manufacturers are making it enjoyable like that. So in that sense, so that is an amazing thing that gives us a better perspective into who he is. I also think that it would be nice if as they were discussing about all these nuances of when someone is on, you have to grab the wheel every once in a while in autopilot mode, and that you can't just sit there and sleep for now in autopilot mode. So it'd be good to push on that a bit, see how far we are out of our timelines, what's going to be happening to the parking structures that are going to be unused, what's going to be happening to people's garages once the shared economy is going. It would have been nice if Joe pushed Elon a little bit in the direction of unpacking the shared economy and seeing what exactly will happen when Tesla decides to enter the shared economy, and just say that, hey, when you're sleeping, let your Tesla go, and when you're not using your Tesla, just let it go and conduct ride sharing for you and make you money. And so it would have been nice if he pushed that. It would have been also nice if there was a little bit more push in the direction of taking Tesla private. What does that actually mean? How would it happen? Why are you interested in taking it private? All this type of questions that people are very interested in. That would have been very good. So we're pretty much done. I want to say just a couple last things on the way out. There was a whole period of time where they talked on the show about these sort of, in terms of we were just talking about with the Tesla that's being driven, that there is in the autopilot mode, that people are trying to sue Tesla for causing issues that cause harm or injury or death, and so during the autopilot mode. And so the general idea is every time someone tries to take Tesla to court for that kind of stuff, Tesla wins. And it's because judges understand that a lot of the time people are just trying to get money out of Tesla, and that it's not actually Tesla's fault. And so they came up with this notion that judges and people, military officers, police officers, are generally good people. And the news is definitely highlighting just the most atrocious things possible about them, and not necessarily the ones where they're doing good work. So I tend to agree with them on that most of them are ethical, most of them are great, most people on the street are generally good, and that's how I typically feel as well, and I'm happy that they brought that up, giving them the benefit of the doubt. So they had this very small segment where Elon said mushrooms are delicious, and I just wish that Joe would have pushed a bit and said, Elon, which psychedelics do you take? How often do you take psychedelics? And what do you feel? What do you experience when you take those psychedelics? That would have been so awesome, because I know a lot of us are really trying to understand better, what types of strategies does that unlock for Elon, that whole process, and what has he done? And Joe, I believe, asked him about meditation. Elon said meditation wasn't really his thing, that he likes to be very useful for society. And I thought that was a really interesting point, was that A lot of people don't think about themselves as, I want to be most useful to society. So if I want to spend my 80 years, with my divine body just working away at building a better world for the next generations, awesome. Great for you. I'm really happy. And I actually think that way about myself as well. And I want to sacrifice myself and my life to leave a better world moving forward. So another thought about this is super important, is just that if you think about it, Elon referenced how it is amazing if his creativity's turned on, this like millions and millions of ideas, but what if you can't turn it off? What if you can't turn off waking up in the morning and being Elon Musk or being Bill Gates? There's never a time that you can turn off your fame and your billionaire status and your impact. If there's never a time you can turn it off and just be normal, and just normally walk through the streets like a normal person, what does that do to you? So think about that. And what would life be like if we had 1 million Teslas, if we had 1 million Musks? What would that be like? And think about all of the potentials that exist. And think about how if we do turn in as a society, with the singularity that we go into virtual worlds and we go explore the cosmos in that sense in terms of simulations and virtual worlds, maybe that is the answer to the Fermi's paradox, that civilizations tend to go inward instead of outward once they reach a certain technological progress. So this has been some thoughts on Elon Musk on Joe Rogan. What a fun episode. One of the best episodes that we've ever had the pleasure of watching two people conduct. Let's push for rebirthing the public intellectual, for more of these one-on-one fireside chats on the internet as well as in live events. Let's inspire more people to build the future and have these nuance-driven, multidisciplinary conversations. We hope you guys had a good time watching this. If you did, give us a comment below with your thoughts, subscribe, join the family, go and create content. Don't just consume this, go and make new videos, new posts, new businesses with this type of stuff. We'd love for you to go and build as well. Huge thanks to Ron, our producer director. Much love, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon. Peace.